Hello, everyone. I haven't done one of these in ages. But yeah, so my name's Becky. I run Northampton Film Festival, and we love doing live streams where we have a chat with the people behind the films of the film festival. And this is the first one of the 2026 series. We are going to be talking to one of our feature film documentary makers. But just before I get into that, if you are watching live, you can put questions in the comments section and I can put them to Helen. If you are not watching live and watching the recording, then you can't. But you're always welcome to get in touch with us. And how you do that is we are northamptonfilmfestival.co.uk. So you can find out about what we're doing. There's a little link to festival in the menu if you want to go straight to the schedule of stuff. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about one of our feature documentaries. I mean, I love a good documentary. I love them so much. And this one is a brilliant one. The Corinthians, We Were the Champions, that we're showing on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 5:30 p.m. at Northampton Filmhouse, followed by a bit of a drinks reception in the Royal and Derngate Theatre right next to the cinema, which we hope people can join us, because I think this is a kind of documentary that inspires action. So we wanted to have a little something after the event so that if you were inspired, that you could go and find something to do with your inspiration. I'm not going to say any more for a minute. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Helen Tither, who is the director of the Corinthians documentary. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to have a chat about it all and to talk to someone about films rather than school WhatsApp groups.
Nice, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm talking about, it's nice to talk about your film. Like, tell us a little bit actually about kind of where you are in this film's, journey. Who's seen it? Like, where is it? I assume you've been working on this for many years, as all
Yes.
feature filmmakers have been.
Yeah, so I first got the idea for the film in 2022, which was a bit shocking when I realised that the other day, because I realised my youngest kid is like 7, and I've been making this film for half of his life. So all he basically
Wow.
knows is the Corinthians and this film. But yeah, we've been making it for we've been pitching it and working on it and everything for about 4 years. Um, and yeah, where it is in its journey, this will be the sort of Midlands premiere of the film. It's been in a couple of film festivals. We had our world premiere in the Inner Hebrides, of all places, at the
Ooh,
Sea Change
lovely.
Festival, which is a women's film focus festival, which is a journey to get there. But it is so nice. It was really supportive, really great environment. But we're about to be have a cinema release um, in March. So our public cinema release is the day after this screening at your festival. So this screening will be a bit of a sneak preview for anybody who wants to come and see before it's on general release. And we're starting off in independent cinemas at Home Cinema in Manchester, which is great. It's a really good indie cinema. But yeah, where the journey, I came up with an idea. I normally pitch ideas for TV documentaries. I'm a TV producer director. I've made documentaries for the BBC based on ideas I've had before about Emmeline Pankhurst and goat farmers and inventors and like all sorts. And I read this article about the Corinthians well, basically, who are they? They are the original Rebel Girls of Football is how we like to pitch them, but they played at the height of the FA ban on women. So the FA banned women from playing on their pitches from 1921 to 1971. And the Corinthians were a rebel band of girls who formed a team in 1949. At the height of that ban, they became the most successful team in the country, beat everybody, and they went off to tour the world. So they were sponsored by the Red Cross. They toured internationally, played in major stadiums like Sporting Lisbon, AC Milan, Juventus ground. They won a World Cup, a European Cup against Germany in 1957, but years before a men's team from Manchester had done that. And yeah, they were the first women's team to tour South America in 1960. So this documentary is told by 10 of those surviving players from this team who basically became so successful around the world and eventually managed to outlast the ban. And I won't ruin the end of the film, but they were one of the most successful teams we ever had. But their story got forgotten about until really recently. So 10 of the women tell this tale in their own voices, which we bring to life with unseen archive and a special animated comic strip that we made and punk music from a punk girl band. Um, And yeah, it's all told in their own words. So it's the best women's football team I guess you've never heard of, is
Yeah,
how I would
absolutely.
pitch it.
Well, yeah, and I think I just loved hearing it. I've just loved hearing them tell the tale as well. Like, obviously they're great footballers. That doesn't always mean. I mean, we're all not all great storytellers, but they are brilliant. Storytellers. They're so entertaining, and it's so great to hear from them. You're just like. What I think makes a great documentary is actually if you're not that bothered about the subject matter, but you just then get in it because the people telling you that story make you realize why it's important. I mean, well, yeah, what was it like working with them?
Oh, they're just great. We're all in a WhatsApp group together. They're like my great aunties. They're just hilarious, sweary, rebellious women who don't give a fig about anything. And
Thank you very much.
and no, they're just I first met so we had this idea, I'd read an article about them. We met up. We managed to get a gang of them together at the National Football Museum of Surviving Players, because obviously this team was playing from the 40s up into the 70s. So there aren't many surviving players left. And I met them and I said, I want to make this documentary. Has no one ever pitched this before? And they're like, no, no one cares about the story. No one cares that we played football. And I was like, wow. And they brought these photo albums and journals and trophies, passports of like with all these stamps around South America. And I was like, oh my, look at this stuff, And they were so funny, and the stories, and I was crying at some of the stories because they were like so moving. And I was like, I'll make this documentary with you. It'll be an easy pitch. Everybody loves women's football. Um, but sadly, not everybody who commissions TV programs loves women's football necessarily. So we pitched the idea for about 6 months, and nobody really wanted to make a TV program about it, which blows my mind. So we set up a company at Films Not Words, which is based on the suffragette motto, "Deeds Not Words," and we decided we'd just make it anyway. So that's what we did. But in that initial process, I sort of, when we first met that day, I met a couple of them, I got to know them. I used to be a print journalist before I went into TV. So I used to write features. I used to write for the Manchester Evening News, which is where I'm based, for about 10 years. So I was like really old school journalist. If I want to find someone's story, I will go and meet them and spend time with them at their house and get to know them and stuff. I don't just like ring people up for a quick chat and that's it. So I'd go and meet one of them, and we'd look through all their albums and have a cup of tea and whatever. And they'd say, "Oh, you want to speak to Marlene? She went to such and such." So I'd go to that woman, and basically we went from one to the other. And it's a bit of a friendship group, but they'd recommend someone else. And then from these 10 women, we managed to work out a story that would take us from 1949 to 1971 between them, and they sort of passed the baton of the story. Myra's our oldest player. She joined in 1954. She was 90 this year, but she's still driving and just being brilliant. Um, and so she starts the story off, if you like, and we take it then all the way through that. But they are just great characters. I mean, we could have fit in more. I mean, you really could have had a cast of more, but we tried to, at the same time, you have to keep to the story that you're telling, don't you? You have to sort of keep to that. There's lots and lots of anecdotes we had to cut out, but they are, I think the reason we were adamant that it was just going to be told by them and not by a narrator or a voiceover. So we did a lot of research and a lot of talking with them and taking their stories down before we went into interview. And we spent 2 hours doing down the lens interviews with each of them. But we knew their stories by that point, so we knew what we wanted them to say. And then we would got all their stories together. I transcribed all of them, and we knitted it together into a sort of overarching story that they told. So it was a lot of work, but I loved meeting them and seeing their photo albums and hearing from them. And so we spent a lot of time getting them comfortable and finding out all about them, because that's what I wanted from the film. What you said was that people would feel like they'd been able to sit down and listen to these stories from these women. And it was almost like you were having a chat with them and get to feel that sort of privilege that I felt when I met them, that like, oh my gosh, I've met these legends and look what they've done. And you don't need a lot else, because the story is so mad. So, and they're so good at telling it, and they did such funny things. And so it was all about like making them really comfortable in the interview and finding out as much as we could to help them tell their story how they want to tell it. And we didn't, we had a set which was we went to a football club in Didsbury, which is where they were based, and that football club lent us their men's changing rooms for a week. And we got memorabilia in the back. We set it up as a little studio so that they would be footballers, not old women, and whatever. And we just spent this week in there, like listening to all their stories and stuff. So yeah, we went to a lot of effort to try and make them relax to be who they wanted to be. We didn't, dress them up. We didn't make them wear makeup. We didn't make them be anything they weren't. And we wanted, to them to tell the story how they wanted to tell it, really. So I'm really pleased that you liked them, because if you met them in the flesh, that is how they are. They're just like ace legends.
Yeah, amazing. Well, and you were saying, I think that that maybe people weren't so interested, when you started out with this kind of women's, sporting stories. Do you think that's changed with obviously the women's football, Euros, World Cup, the Rugby World Cup that we've just had? Do you think there's a change, or do you think it's still a bit of an uphill battle?
Yeah, I think there's a real difference. And I think this is where I fell down. There's a real difference between what the public are into and want to see, and the public support for women's sport and women's football, and the attendance that they're getting at matches, for Arsenal, Manchester City women, teams like that, and the sort of love of the game now among girls who want to join teams. And there is a real support for women's football and women's rugby with the World Cup that happened last year. Um, I don't think that's translated yet into what will be commissioned to be shown on TV, put it that way. I think if you look at, even though it's very popular, how many women's football matches are actually streamed on TV or shown on TV. There's a women's football show. It's on like midnight or something on a Saturday night. Who's up to see that? Whereas like Match of the Days had hours earlier in the night of watching men's football. So I think there's still, and if you look on streamers and on online platforms, there's a lot more content about men's sport, men's sports documentaries and so on than there is about women's. So I went along, everyone loves women's football. Look how successful the Euros was. Look how successful the Lionesses, brilliant. And it was like, no, nobody. I was literally told that's so niche. Women's football's too niche. Nobody wants to watch women's sport. And on top, I mean, we had like, in the world of documentaries, if you think, I think it's like 25% of documentaries are about women anyway. 13% of all sports coverage is of women, and we're outside of London, so we're based in Manchester, and only 25% of TV is commissioned outside of Manchester. On top of which, our women are in their 70s and 80s, which is a demographic you just don't see on TV either, especially for women. So we had this like, older ladies, northern sport documentary. It was like we couldn't have picked a harder thing to get commissioned, really. But I hope that it's changing. And what we thought was, well, we know that people want to know this story, because we did a crowdfund to start off with, and we got loads of publicity. We tried for the publicity, but we were on Five Live, we were on the World Service, we were in national newspapers, and everyone was like, all the journalists were like, great story, great women, we're brilliant characters. I was like, I know. So we knew that the story was good and people wanted to watch it. So we just thought, if we make it, we'll find a way to get it out there. And we'd never put a film in a cinema before. We'd never done a film festival before. And we've just sort of managed to just keep going, because we just thought that people would watch it. And now sort of here we are.
Yeah, and like I say, I think the best documentaries, you don't have to be necessarily a fan of the subject matter, but I just can't see why people wouldn't just love this film. Like, so like, hence why we've programmed it. But yeah, I just challenge anyone, because I think, again, I think people will always find something in a great documentary, because it isn't just about one thing. And I love that. For us, obviously, we say Northampton is a town of rebels and revolutionaries, misfits and mavericks, creatives and change makers. So I just watched it and was like, well, this is so up our street. I mean, you said about having a punk soundtrack. They are rebels, and the spirit. I just came out of it going, I was just filled with their spirit. I was like, what am I going to do now? So I suppose that wasn't really a question, but but I think, it's that rebel spirit is infectious and brilliant, and we need to see more of it from the people we don't always see it from, i.e. the stories that are chosen, that 25% off 25%. But yeah, like, I don't know, how energized were you after finishing talking to these women?
I even now, so we had, as you can imagine, in the process of trying to get something funded and crowdfunded, and when we got knocked back from TV, we're like, right, it's going to be a film. We had a lot of rejection along the way, but we had this WhatsApp group with them. I see them all the time, and they motivate me. So I'll be like, I'm going to go and see, whoever. I'm going to go and pitch this film again. We kind of, and they're like, come on, get on with it. And I'm like, well, you can't let them down because they were so rebellious themselves. Like if we've been through some sort of hard time in making the film or whatever, I think like God, what did they go through? Literally, they would have national newspapers mocking them and they were just teenage girls like doing something they loved. And I was so angry, I think, myself at the way they'd been treated and sort of annoyed at myself as well for not noticing when I was growing up that girls playing, I never grew up thinking girls could play football, and I was going to school in the 80s. It wasn't even banned. So I sort of grew up annoyed at myself that I'd been brainwashed by this idea that girls don't do this and boys do that and whatever. But I was so sort of motivated by the injustice of it, but also the sort of spirit of them. But that's what we really wanted to convey to people at the end, because in some ways, there's sad bits to the story, because obviously not all the players are with us anymore, and not all of them live to see the recognition that they're getting now. So that it could be a sort of sad element, but we didn't want that to be the overriding emotion at the end, because we're so proud of them and what they did. We really, like, off the back of this, we would really love them to be recognised properly in the sort of football, in the National Football Museum. We're based in Manchester. We've got Manchester United, Manchester City. So we think this should be the women's team. Where are the statues to the women in Manchester who played football? And we want to use the film and, to send out to women and girls football clubs to inspire that next generation who are going through the same things now that those girls went through in the 50s. So we really want to inspire action at the end of it. So I'm really pleased that's how you felt, because we wanted it to be like, it's a bit sad, but it's more uplifting and feeling like, well, if they did that. I mean, the thing is, I am not a massive football fan. I have kids, I have boys, they're into football. I have to go and stand on the sidelines and watch a lot of football. But it's what I loved when I met them was the rebel spirit. I just love a rebel, and I love a rebel story, and I love the fact that it's this David versus Goliath battle of them against the system. And you can't imagine, I don't think, for us now, what it must take to go and do something like that, when everybody was saying to you, nobody's going to love you if you play that. Who loves a girl who gets dirty and plays football? Like, they really sort of did go against the tide, and I think that's what we really loved about it. So I'm glad that came across, because when you make a film, you want people to feel something, don't you, at the end of it? You don't want people to go, that's factually accurate. How interesting.
Yes, yeah, it should be, it's not the end, it's not a full stop. It should be the kind of, oh, okay, what, yeah, exactly. And that's why, we, because we were doing some work as Northampton Film Festival around the Women's Rugby World Cup, which came to West Northamptonshire and Northampton last summer. And I didn't know anything about rugby, but now I do. And I've just seen the impact that it's had on, different types of women going and having a go at, again, different types of rugby, some just having a go for fitness and doing walking rugby, some now going, right, actually, I could be the next, Women's Rugby World Cup, star. And so after your screening, and we're working with West Northamptonshire Council and Northamptonshire Sport, and we've got the Northamptonshire FA coming along afterwards. We're having a bit of a drinks reception, and there's going to be so some clubs and people there that people can hopefully come out of, that screening and just kind of go, oh, hang on a minute. There's all of these women's sports that I could have a go at. Doesn't mean I have to become professional, but actually I could have a go. Or just to be fair, just talking to people that, again, do things that, haven't, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and like some things just weren't on your radar, and hopefully just get rid of those kind of barriers. We're showing another film called Swim Sisters, which is a documentary about women swimming. And there's quite a few. There's a She Will Play On, which is a football film about young working class footballers, and how it's a drama, but how there's barriers to them to get into sport. One about a lady who's got kind of a heart condition, how she still wants to be active. But so we've got lots of films that just about inspiring people to go off and do what they want to do that, you know, have been told maybe in some point in the past they can't do. And I think, yeah, you're totally right that it is about a film should, you know, should be something that inspires action.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they all sound brilliant. I think I've seen the trailer for Swim Sisters. I really want to see that. So that looks really good. And all those things. And I think the rugby, what was great about the Women's Rugby World Cup was a lot of the messaging around it, that I've got a strong physique, I'm a strong woman. You know, it wasn't just about the sport, it was about the way that your body image and the way you'd see yourself and the courage and stuff like that, wasn't it? Which was brilliant. So I think as well, I mean, the reason that you know, even if you're not sporty, a lot of sports films or documentaries can be so inspiring because it's a lot of against the odds, isn't there? And sort of superhuman feats and sort of that's so inspiring. But I think as well, there's something about the rebels in all those stories being against the system and underdogs and stuff. I mean, I love Naiad, the film about Diana Naiad, the swimmer who with Jodie Foster in it. And I'm not a massive swimmer, but I was like literally crying buckets in that film. Like, come on, Diana! And you know, I'm inspired by Dolly Parton or you know, people like that. When Emmeline Pankhurst, we made a film about her, and I think, you know, we've talked about this film. I've talked about it at women's business events, at women in tech events, at Man United, at places like that. And a lot of women have latched on to not the fact that they played football, but the fact that they were doing something that everyone was telling them not to do. And they come up to me and said, I feel like I'm still the only woman on my board. I'm still the only woman in this meeting at my engineering firm or whatever it is. And you know, sometimes you need just a hero, don't you? You need a heroine or a hero, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be somebody doing the same thing you're doing. I don't necessarily look at lots of women in film when I'm going, although I do, but you know, I might think, what would Emmeline do? Or what would Dolly Parton say? Because it doesn't really matter what the women are doing, it's what they've done, like the struggle they've had, isn't it? And the success that they've had sometimes. So and sporting documentaries are great for that, isn't there? Because there's always a good narrative arc, isn't there, that you're cheering on towards the end, hopefully. But yeah, it should be a good reception afterwards. I'm looking forward to meeting some of the other people that are there.
Well, yeah, and you're going to be doing Q&A for us as well
Yeah.
after the screening, which is it's always really nice, because I think it's always great when you've watched a film. There's always some questions that people have, either about the process or just about, you know, like trying to also, like, usually I like to try and pick out that, you know, you mentioned earlier there's some stories that didn't make it, some anecdotes, and I think the Q&A afterwards is to go, oh, is there anything that, you know, you can't say online here but we'd like to hear?
Oh, think of all the outtakes. Do you know what?
Yeah.
Our first cut of the film was 2.5 hours long, because we just, when you script something, sometimes you don't realize how long that's going to actually become. And we were like, oh, but that's such a good story. It was so hard cutting stuff out, but in the end, nobody wants to sit through 2.5 hours, and you would lose everybody in the story trying to keep the little bits that you wanted to keep. So we had to be quite brutal in cutting some stuff out. But you've got to sort of think at the end, what's the overarching story, haven't you? And sort of stick to that. But yeah, luckily for everybody who's coming, it is not 2.5 hours long. It's 90 minutes, like a football match. So, you know, that seems fitting, hopefully.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, and you're right about that. You know, you can't be what you can't see, and I think that, you know, the more that we and that's what's so good about, you know, I mean, I run a film festival, so I'm biased. That's what I think is so good about a film festival, not just mine, but other people's, is that you get to go and experience so many different stories. Obviously, yours is a feature documentary, but we also show shorts, so you know, you might get, you know, 10 different stories in an hour, and I think that's what's so great, that, you know, there's only so many films that do make it through to cinema. Of course, yours is one of those, but you don't always get to experience all these stories that, you know, don't get commissioned for one reason or another. And so just going to kind of put your, you know, feet in someone else's shoes is just so important as a society. I mean, gosh, particularly now.
Particularly now, yeah. And watching it with other people, don't you think? Because like this, yeah, so for years, like, you know, I've done TV documentaries, and then you've got like a TX date when it's going to come out, and you're like telling all your friends and family, and you're sat there maybe with your mum and dad or your partner watching your program go out, and you're like, well, that's gone out then, and wait to see if anyone complains. But we did a documentary for the BBC about Emmeline Pankhurst that I was obsessed with making literally for about a year, and no one would commission that either. This is the thing, it doesn't really surprise me that in the end of the day that they wouldn't commission this film, because we were told for that nobody wants a documentary about Emmeline Pankhurst. Everyone knows who she is. I was like, it's the 100th anniversary of women getting the vote. People love Emmeline Pankhurst. She's the most popular woman of the 20th century, and there's never been a documentary about her, so it's probably a good time. Anyway, we eventually got it commissioned. It went on the BBC. And then as a sort of like little prequel to that coming out, we did a preview of the film in Manchester at the Free Trade Hall, which is the site of the first suffragette demonstration when Christabel Pankhurst got arrested there for spitting at a police officer. So we held the screening of the film there. It was like a free event. Andy Burnham came and did a speech and whatever, and off the back of that it got sent to schools all around Manchester. But that was the first time I'd sat in a room with like those 200 people watching something that I'd made, and it was so different to watching it on TV at home with just your family. There's like a whole different, it's like when you go to the cinema to watch a film and you're experiencing it with all the people there, like this festival. So different to watching it on your home, on your own at home. And that's when I was like, everybody came up to me at the end going, what can I do to do something for women's rights? I need to go and like start a march. I'm like, yeah, go start a march or whatever, like go and support Women's Day. And I love that feeling of watching something with other people. So I think that's why film festivals are brilliant, aren't they? Because like you say, you're seeing things that you might not have seen before, but you're in a sort of collective of people who all love film and want to see what's new and what new techniques people are doing, and you come away like with loads of ideas, don't you? I think so. Yeah, it must be a hard job for you though, curating it all and like picking out what you're gonna have.
It's really hard because we get so every year you get more and more great films. Luckily, we're only 5 years old, so I cannot imagine what it'd be like when we're 10 years old. But yeah, you're right about its energy. It's energy, isn't it? Like energy, people coming together. And we try to really have that a kind of a friendly festival where you might not be a film buff, you might be a film buff, you might be in the film industry, you might not, whatever, can come along and just experience great stories that I think you've demonstrated this evening are important stories to be heard. So thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We won't chat anymore because it is a Q&A after the film. So people should come along, book a ticket, come to the Q&A and get a drink with us afterwards and have a chat and discover what is going on for women in Northamptonshire. But yeah,
definitely.
Thank you, Helen. We will speak very soon.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks for your time.
So if you are inspired to come along, you can visit our website and click the festival button. That takes you straight through to the schedule of the film festival. It's Wednesday, the 4th of March, 2026, which is Northampton Film Festival's 5th birthday. It's 5:30 at Northampton Filmhouse, which is a cinema connected to the Royal and Derngate Theatre, and then we're in the theatre afterwards for some drinks. And yeah, it'd be just lovely to see lots of people there, because honestly, I feel like this film encapsulates what our film festival's about, and it's just a blooming brilliant film. So yeah, come along and see you there.